then. Thank you so much for that intro, Gloria. Um, it is great to be here to get to speak with everyone. Um, and it's just a really great experience altogether. I'm really glad that you were all able to take time out to just get to work through this workshop as well. So a brief intro, sort of like Gloria has said, I'm a storyteller, I'm a designer. I've worked in developing products for a substantial amount of companies in AI, EdTech, healthcare, telecoms in the last 6 to 7 years. One of the more popular ones that I think most people are more familiar with would be Lara.ng. I was pivotal to the version of the tool, AI tool that we use nowadays. A lot of my work has really been invested in just helping um, to build the kind of tools and products that people can adopt, but also the tools and products that solve a lot of problems. And I think that that's something that we really need to invest in Africa as a whole. Outside of that, I write a lot as well. I'm someone who also has done a lot of work in content development and marketing. Um, for a while, I actively helped organizations in the US sort of drive education platforms for high school and K-12 students. So I want to say everything in that space between design, comms, content, and storytelling. I've had the opportunity to sort of navigate those experiences, and I would just really love to share, some of those insights with everyone. So for this workshop, I would love for it to be really interactive. We're going to have a bunch of icebreakers. Just take a little time as well just to complete some tasks so that all through you are able to assimilate yourself by participating as well. So if you're in a place where you can speak, you could just, pop in and say hi, and just tell me what your name is and a random fact about yourself before we get started. Okay, I
Okay,
think,
good evening. Oh,
hi,
sorry.
Victoria. Hi.
Yeah, good evening, sir. Thank you for wanting to give back to the community, for volunteering for this for us. We really appreciate it. So my name is Victoria Chirendunwa Okeke. I'm a public health graduate, a virtual assistant, and a digital marketer. And it's
Amazing.
really lovely to be in this community. Thank you.
All right. Great to meet you, Victoria. And it's very exciting to see that you're doing a lot of things in a lot of diverse spaces as well. Having studied public health and then moving into the digital marketing space. I think that's very insightful stuff. All right, guys. Next person.
Hi everyone. Good evening, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Precious. We can hear you.
Okay, my name is okay. Firstly, thank you so much for volunteering. We really appreciate this because it's not everything, right? So, secondly, my name is Opodre from Precious, and I'm a student of Minifort, and I study history and diplomatic studies. I'm a graphic designer and a writer. It's nice to meet you.
Amazing. It's great to meet you, Precious. Great to meet you as well. And I'm really excited to hear that you have decided to dive into graphic design as well. I think there's a lot of opportunities in that space for you to just apply yourself in a lot of roles and, just work on a lot of projects that are impactful. So great to meet you, Precious. Who's next? Victor, I think your hand is up. I don't know if it's been up the whole time. Okay, hi, Adrian. I think your hand is up then.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Oduan Eyes. I'm a quant surveyor, project manager, and a communication enthusiast. I love anything communication and all that. So I'm glad to be here to learn about designing and storytelling because I believe that content creation is something that everybody should know in terms of personal branding. So I look forward to learning more about the topic. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for joining in, Odunayo. And once again, it's great to hear that you have a versatility of skills, and then have also, just decided to have an interest in comms and content development. So great to meet you, Odunayo. Up next, anyone else?
Hello, good evening.
Hi, Precious, another Precious.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Saf, for this for volunteering and for this opportunity to learn from you. My name is Adewale Precious Oluwatumishi, and I'm a student of Olabisi Onabanjo English Language, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you, sir.
Amazing, amazing. It's great to meet you, Precious. And I'm really glad to hear that you have also, decided to go out of your way, outside of what you're actively studying to, pick up a ton of new skills, and knowledge and insights as well. And I want to say that I think that English is a very, very insightful course. Sometimes I wish I had studied English instead, because I think it helps give you the framework for being able to just develop content and language altogether. So it's great to meet you, Precious. Who's next?
Hello, good evening, house.
Hi, good evening.
So thank you so much for this opportunity, because I remember like 2 days ago I was kind of searching for storytelling and all, and I was just feeling lucky to just be here, and I was just like I say, nature just brought it to me, and I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
That's amazing. Great to meet you, Godwin. Great, 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 great. All right, hi, Victor. I think your hand is up.
Good evening, sir.
Hi, Victor. Hi, good evening. Great to meet you.
Yes, sir. Well, sir, I'm actually thankful to you for showing up here today, at least just to let us gain from your experience as well. Though I'm a recent graduate of the Federal University of Technology, Akure.
Amazing.
My passion for designing actually drove me to be one of the people attending this meeting. So I want to say thank you so
Amazing.
much, sir.
Amazing. I'm very, very glad that I could be here. And I think one interesting thing as well is also that I actively used to design in university. So that entire construct is something that I'm very familiar with, and I'm glad that you're here. Hi, Gift. I think you have your hand up. Looks like you're on the
Yeah, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Good evening,
Hi, good evening.
Jesimiel. It's nice. Yeah, it's nice to have you here. So my name is Gift Adenu. I'm a graphic designer, a video editor. Also, I am into
Okay, looks like Gift had to mute briefly. Okay, so I think Penny, while we're waiting for Gift, Joshua, do you want to share your introduction? I think you had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, good evening, sir. Thank you for availing us of your presence. I am Joshua. I'm a tech tutor, a growing social media manager, and also a growing front-end developer. I call
Amazing.
myself a coat of many colors. Yeah, thank you for being here for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the intro. It's great to meet you, Joshua. I'm always very excited to meet people who do a lot of things. And I think that one of the things that we will also touch on during this workshop is sort of how to streamline your offerings as a person between these related things, whether that's digital marketing, front-end development, design, and all of the things in this space. I think that definitely there's an opportunity to aggregate all of that as a career. So yeah, anyone else want to go next? Okay, hi Toby.
Yeah, good evening. Jessamine, it was great to have you on the session this evening. So my name is Toby. I'm into business development, and I'm a founder. Been able to work with teams of people, and I've seen the impact of storytelling. And I believe that this session is going to shed a lot more light on it and help me gain mastery. Thank you very much.
Amazing, amazing. It's great to have a founder here. It's really great to meet you, Toby. And I'm really excited for how we can put some of these insights actively to your own space as well. Because I believe that as a founder, you actively have a lot of opportunity to be able to integrate these things with a quicker execution time into your own workflows. So that's something I'm very excited about. All right. Antonia, I think your hand is up.
Okay. Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Antonia.
Thank you very much, sir, for this opportunity to be here to learn from you. I do not take it for granted at all. My name is Anthony.
I'm guessing that's the network. It looks like Antonia just dropped off. Gift, looks like you still have your hand raised. If you want to still speak or complete an introduction.
Yes. Sorry. I kind of muted
No
my mic.
problem.
Yeah, thank you very much. Like I said, my name is Gift. Yeah, I'm a graphic designer, a brand identity designer, and a product design enthusiast. Yeah, so it's great to have you, Jason, here, and I will actually love to learn more about brand storytelling in order to make my brand identity design more effective. Thank you.
Amazing. Great to meet you, Gift. Okay, so anyone
Yeah.
else wants to give introductions or anything else before we get started? Okay, hi, Eniola. Okay, hi, Cheche. Okay, hi, Eniola. I think you can speak and introduce yourself.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay. So, my name is Eniola Olakamide. Yeah, a graphics designer, a brand designer, and I'm a student of the University of Technology, Akure, Federal University of Technology, Akure, studying architecture. So, thank you so much, sir, for this opportunity. I think I want to use it to get insight on design storytelling, basically how I can elevate my brand and all of that, and then get more jobs and be more effective in the field. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Amazing. Great to meet you, Eniola. Excited to meet you. Okay, Cheche, I think you wanted to introduce yourself. Hi, Cheche. I think your hand is up. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right. Apologies. Okay, I think when we can get Cheche to speak. Hi, Oluwakolimi. Your hand is up as well.
Hi, good evening. My name
Hi,
is
good evening.
Oluwapelumi Olatoye. I graduated from Federal University of Technology, Akure. Okay, so
Amazing.
I'm taking interest in content creation, and that's why I'm here for this workshop. I hope to learn a lot and to gain a lot of insight. Thank you so much for this privilege.
Amazing. It's really great to meet you, Oluwakolimi. I'm very excited to get to interact with you as well. Hi, Elma. Your hand is raised. You want to introduce yourself?
Hello.
Hi, Elma. Good evening.
Elma, and I love the for I'm a writer and I am business.
Amazing. It's great to meet you, Elma. Great to hear that you're a writer. I think there's a lot of opportunity in that as well. To be able to work yourself into the storytelling pipeline. So very great to meet you. Hi, Enoch. Your hand is up. Great to meet you as well. You want to introduce yourself? Hi, Enoch. I think your hand is raised. Okay, great.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is
Hi.
Enoch Omafu. Yeah, I'm a mixologist working currently in Twin Waters. So it's really nice to be here. Yeah, it's really nice to be here. I plan and want to learn new things. That's why I'm here.
Amazing, amazing. It's really great to meet you, Enoch.
Thank you.
And I'm very excited to hear about your insights as we go along as well. All right, is there anyone else that wants to introduce themselves before we get right into it? Okay, hi, Abigail.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Ebukon Abigail. I'm a 400 level student of Uniben, and I joined this training to actually learn more about storytelling because I'm more of a media person, but I believe that there are lessons I'm going to take out from this session about storytelling. Thank you so much.
Amazing, amazing. Great to meet you, Abigail. Very excited to also hear about your insights in the media space. Okay, closing call. Anyone else? All right then, amazing. So I think we can get started. All right. So I think a couple of things that we need to touch on first. So the idea for this workshop is that between now and the end of the workshop on Sunday, I should be able to help you understand how design thinking works, what exactly design thinking is, as well as being able to let you know how you can use storytelling to communicate your ideas or your products, how best you can apply design thinking concepts and themes to your product, and how you can build and pitch a simple version of a product that you've built, to an audience. So I think we'll get started with understanding what is design thinking. And this is an amazing thing that I really like to touch on for people. So the traditional way that people often, and let me just share my screen so that we get a view on things. Now, the traditional way that people have often come to innovation or solutions or being able to come up with ideas for particular things is that often, perhaps as a board of directors, people come together as a board and we say, oh, this is what works, this is what doesn't work. And then we move forward. People just have random ideas and say, oh, I think this would work, and I think that would work. And that's the traditional way of doing things. Design thinking, however, requires us to go through a very specific framework or system or structure. So basically what we're saying is design thinking gives a manual or a structured effort towards creativity or towards coming up with ideas and innovation. And we've learned in the last couple of years that that's the best way to be able to gain most traction when you're building new things. So one of the first things that we need to tackle is creativity, because creativity is an essential part of marketing, of advertising, of innovation, or storytelling. So now I would say that what creativity is creativity is the process that moves you from not understanding a problem to having completed solution. And I'll be walking you through how creativity can work in design or in storytelling, and how creativity sort of starts out as a prerequisite for design thinking. So now an essential part of design thinking is the first step, and I think it's something that we always want to note down. The first step of design thinking is empathy. Very essential, empathy. And that's what sort of defines or sort of what keeps, design thinking as a separate institution or a separate focus from literally everything else. So now how does empathy work? And I want us to just, set up a quick icebreaker or a quick activity to just sort of get into that headspace. Now, empathy requires that we get into the headspace of whoever it is that we're building for, whoever it is that has a story or a product, and sort of understand the experiences that they have. Now, what empathy is, and let me set up a product and give an example. What empathy is not is, now imagine I own a beverage company, perhaps Bournvita or Milo, and I decide that I want to make a strawberry version of Milo or Bournvita. And I decide that, you know what, I think people will like strawberry Milo because I like strawberry Milo. That's wonderful information. It's a great guess. However, here's the question. You don't know that for a fact. And that's where empathy comes into play. Now, empathy ensures that outside of my own personal requirements or designs or whatever I feel like is best or whatever I feel like I may want, I take the step to ensure that I try to understand what exactly it is that they may want, and that's where empathy fits in. So now think of it in this way. Think of a product that you really like, and that's what our quick exercise would be. Think of a product that you really like or a product that you use regularly. And I want you to share a hypothesis about that product. So it may be perhaps if you use, you're someone who uses MTN regularly, and you can share with me and say, oh, I think we can just take 3 people so that we're able to just assess it quickly, and say, oh, I feel like as an MTN user, I feel like most people would prefer or would prefer to have unlimited internet, or I feel like they would prefer to only have internet 3 hours in a day, but it would work without disruptions. It can be literally anything. You can say it could be bread, it could be food, it could be an application if you're someone who's into like digital applications as well. So any 3 people, let's pick a product and pick one random assumption that you have about that product. Okay, great. Precious, your hand is up.
Okay, I'll be picking an application which is Duolingo. And the assumption I have on Duolingo is that Duolingo, it would be better for me. It would be better if Duolingo tries to, help fasten up learning instead of keeping us on one particular lesson for like a week there. Instead of that, it would just fasten up the beginning. That's why I assume Duolingo should be better.
Okay, sorry, Precious. Just to get that right. So your hypothesis is that you wish that Duolingo would allow you to do multiple lessons at once instead of just being stuck on one particular one until you complete it.
Yes, yes. And also let us test people. Why would I follow someone without being able to test them, right?
Okay, amazing. Now that's a great hypothesis. So now a great question would be, how many of us agree with that hypothesis? If you agree, if you feel like, oh, if you use Duolingo, I personally, I don't mind the fact that I have to complete it, want to move on to the next one. But if you disagree, you can just raise your hand real quick. If you feel like, if you use Duolingo, if you've ever used Duolingo and you feel like you disagree with Precious, let me just see your hand up real quick. Okay, no disagreement. So now, while that is great, that means that in this case, you have made a hypothesis where a substantial number of other people agree, and which is a great hypothesis. However, I do not agree, because I believe that I would rather complete the task before moving on to the other one, because what if I move on to the next task and it includes something I don't already know about? And that's where empathy comes in. Now, how do you gain empathy, and how do you put yourself in the shoes of those you are building for? And that's step 1, data. And that's like a very essential part of what's it called? That's a very essential part of design thinking. So how then do you collect audience data? How then do you empathize using audience data? Now you have to get yourself into that headspace where you, by empathizing now, how do you collect the audience data? Surveys. Sometimes people have meetups with audiences, speak to them in person, and you may even decide to have calls with them. You may decide to meet them physically. And that is an essential part of getting into the headspace of any users. In fact, that's the first step of any design thinking process. If you're going to be engaging in design thinking, you need to understand how they think. So before you start a mood board, before you open any design software, before you start writing anything, you need to stop and empathize every single time. Because another essential thing is that whenever you are communicating for any product or any tool that you've built out, for literally anything that you've done, your goal is to evoke emotions. You want to get people to do particular things. And if you do not understand the emotions that they already feel while dealing with the problem, you cannot replicate that in your design or in your storytelling. So that's an essential part of that. So basically, that is where empathy fits in for design thinking. And And in terms of that, when you have empathy, then you can move on to creativity and etc. Now, there is a very important, what's it called? There's a very important framework that we use for design thinking, and it's called the IDEO framework. And this is something that you may want to write down. The first of those is empathy, empathizing. The next one is definition. So after empathizing, after understanding what problem it is that they deal with, your next step is to define what that problem is. Now, how do you define the problem? In three ways. I often say you can use three major variables. Stories is number one. You need to understand the stories of the people that you're trying to reach out to. What that means is, and a lot of times in advertising and marketing, or even in product, we often use what we call user personas, and that's something that if you want to note down as well. You spend a lot of time trying to understand the people who will use this product I'm building. What are they like? Who are they like? What are the stories of their lives? What do they do on a day-to-day? Sometimes we draw up something we call a checkpoint, or like you basically drop a chart and say, this are the individual media checkpoints during the day. At what points do they interact, or would they interact with what I'm trying to build, or with media platforms that I will be using? Something we used to use while I worked in agency was, we would say, when you wake up in the morning at 7 a.m., if people check their phones, what social media platforms do they use? That's a part of their story. When they go to drop off their kids at school, do they listen to the radio? That's a part of their story. Now, for being able to understand their story, it helps you understand the kind of patterns that they have, the kind of habits that they have, what are the things that people do repeatedly, and what are the insights that drive these habits. So there are people who go to the gym every day. If you do not do that survey, or if you don't do that research, you don't know. You're not able to pick up on that pattern or that habit. An essential part of things is, when you understand a pattern or habit, you're able to insert yourself or your product into that habit. Now, if you know for a fact that people that you are targeting, perhaps you're targeting young Gen Z people, and you know that they often spend a lot of time in the gym, if you have a product that you are looking to advertise, you know that the gym is a touch point where you can advertise to them. When you're creating ads, you know that you can talk about gym culture. If you're building a product, you know that you can build a product relating to the time they spend at the gym, because you know that people in this persona spend a lot of time in the gym. That is a pattern that they have. And you now look for where you can insert yourself or your product into that pattern. Now, the last one, and something that's really important, is motivations. What's the driving force behind them taking specific actions? So another thing is, I'll also help share this slide later on for those of us who might not be able to easily access it at the moment, so that we can, just review at a later time. And their motivations. So what are the things that they do? Why do they do the things that they do, and etc. Now, a next step is, and something I find that's very, very essential. And I would want us to, we're going to take a quick task to work on it, and we'll share our responses in the comments. Now, you're going to pick a problem that you feel like your product wants to solve, or a problem that a persona that you're dealing with often deals with. And you now say, and we use the term that we say, how might we statements. Now, I may say, if I'm trying to perhaps, and let's use Piggyverse for an example. When Piggyverse started up, they said they realized that people had issues with saving consistently and safely. So they would say, how might we help people save consistently and safely? That's a how might we statement. Now, sometimes when you understand your user persona better, you can insert them into that how might we statement. So if you know that you're targeting, say maybe you're targeting retirees in Nigeria, you can say, how might we help retirees in Nigeria save money effectively and consistently? And that is a how might we statement. And a how might we statement is very, very essential for any step that you'll be taking into building out any stories, any products, any marketing campaigns, anything. How might we statements are your method of inquisition into literally anything. And I want us to take a quick exercise right now. So pick a problem, any problem that you've noticed around you, or a problem that you yourself have faced. And I want you to now in the comment section share and say, how might we, or how might I solve for this particular problem? Now develop a how might we statement based on that problem. If you know perhaps the group of people, persona of people that deal with that issue, you can include them as well. So if perhaps you feel like it's university students maybe university students struggle with getting food after classes. You can see how might we help university students get food after night classes, and that was how that would work for how might be for a product statement. So we can start sharing in the comment section. I will start off and say, in my own case, how might we help young people get access to free music, to music without overspending? And that's the how might we. So if you can, let's start sharing out in the comments, and then we can look through every one of those how might we statements and see how better it can be worded to help you get to the point where you need to. So I think we can just, I'll give say 5 minutes for that exercise. It's 8:44 right now. So by 8:49, we'll just look through every one of those, and we can decide which of them are very succinct how might we statements and which of them may not be as effective. Are we clear? Amazing. Okay. All right. I'm looking through and these look really great. Amazing work, guys. Amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Okay. So I know I said 8:49, so I'm just gonna give it a few more minutes so that we can, or 8:48 rather, so that we can, if anyone else has any more to share, but these are already looking really great. Okay. So I think if there's any other additions, okay, amazing. Thanks, Halima, for adding on that. We can just include as we go along, but let's start reviewing them. So the first of them from Joshua. Joshua says, what can be done to help university students from getting deep while working on getting apartments for themselves? So I like this. The only tricky part is we didn't stick to this, didn't stick to the framework for how might we, but it's still, it still carries out the same objective. So if I was going to reward that, I would say, how might we help university students not get duped while trying to get apartments for themselves? And that's a very solid how might we statement. The next one says, how might we help brands and businesses understand the importance of good branding and visuals? And another interesting or essential thing for how might we statement is that it should properly quantify the problem you're trying to solve. It shouldn't be vague. It shouldn't be confusing. So for this now, we may say, well, how might we help brands and businesses understand the importance of good branding and visuals? This appears like a marketing-related how might we statement. So the focus here perhaps is you're trying to help build out something to help brands and businesses, do better branding and visuals. So if that's what you're trying to say, it should be a little more concise, but very solid. Now, Rotimi says, how might we help business owners secure their businesses with group contributions? Very solid. I really like this. And I think that this is something that we can move on with as a template for the next one. Because this is the kind of thing that you craft out when you're trying to start out a startup or a new business. So because in this case, you've identified the problem, you know what the problem is. And then not just that, you've also been able to identify your user persona, business owners. So it says, how might we help business owners secure their businesses with group contributions? Great. So we'll come back to this Rotimi, because I feel like this is a really great template for us to reuse. How might we help Africans in diaspora get access to African food without going through the stress of traveling down? Amazing one, Elumi. And this is something we'll come back to as well, because I actively recently worked on a project relating to this, and I think I could help us walk through the process from ideation to execution as well. Up next, how might we help local businesses gain visibility? That's from Jayola. Amazing one, very solid. Adi John says, how might we help small business owners learn how to manage their social media platforms effectively in order to increase visibility and reaching audiences? This is great. However, I will keep it shorter. And why? Because you are going to use how might we statements for, You're going to use how might we statements for your brainstorming, and you do not want to overload how you are going to develop the ideas that will follow thereafter. So if I was going to reword this, I would say, and I'll type this in the comments as well, I would say, how might we help small business owners learn how to manage their social media platforms effectively? The objective is something that you may already know, but it doesn't necessarily need to be included in the how might we, because you're trying to mentally prep your mind or your brain for being able to brainstorm for a solution to this. And if you're working in a group, well, you're sort of doing the same thing. Great. So Caitlin says, how do we pass on knowledge to youth to enhance societal development? Very amazing. Very solid next. Very solid build for that. And that's something I find very exciting. So yes, I would say this works as well. Anolu Akwa says, how might we get African women to embrace more of their natural hair than synthetic hair? This is great. And one thing I like here is it is concise, or it touches on a very specific relevance without being extensive. And here's what I mean. Now it says, how might we get African women? First off, African women is the persona we're targeting. It's touched on the persona. And it says, now how do we get them to embrace more of their natural hair than synthetic hair? So in this case, outside of just natural hair, you have identified the fact that you want them to embrace their natural hair more than synthetic hair. That's a very specific theme that would be essential for brainstorming. And it's great that you included it in the how might we, but at the same time, you didn't allow it to be way too long that it would stress you out brainstorming. So great work. Gibbs says, how might we help women gain confidence in their crown hair without overspending? Amazing. This sounds like a marketing campaign, but very solid. Awosanya Halima says, how can we help young people get access to learning a skill they want, even when they genuinely can't afford it, so they can also empower more people? So this is great as well. The only issue I have with this, sort of what I pointed out a little earlier, it can touch on you can touch on what you want to target, but make sure that the how might we is not so long that it's what's it called? It stifles how you're brainstorming. The only reason why perhaps you could do that is if you've already crafted what your brand or product's about, and that's something we'll touch on next. So Precious Isaiah says, how might we help students solve bottleneck problems that stop them from implementing their business ideas, especially when there is not much time? I think that we can shorten this. We can say, how might we help students solve bottleneck problems in business ideas or for crafting, stop bottleneck problems for crafting business ideas? Especially when there's not too much time, it's a great way to narrow it down, but it makes it a little bulky. So Blessing Damilola says, how might we help low-income earners own their houses without running into debt? Very valid. Yeah, I think that's a great how might we. Now, how might we help young designers find positioning in a competitive market? That's from Godwin. Very great. Very, very great. So I was saying, Halimia says, how can we help more people believe in themselves and the ability to trust themselves and show consistent in their craft without following craft what they think would give them money rather than value? So I have a few notes on this. I like the general idea, but two things are missing here. One of them being that we say help more people. We've not identified the persona here. More people is a little vague. It's a little generic. So we don't know what people specifically are we targeting. Are we targeting young people? Are we targeting uni graduates? Are we targeting employed people? And if you're targeting just people in general, I feel like there will still be there would still be like a class or a persona that you can use to identify for this. So yeah, but also this how might we statement is great, but it feels a little vague. So if I was using this how might we statement to sort of develop a product, I wouldn't be 100% sure what kind of product I would want it to interpret to, but I think that's something that we can touch on in a bit. So for Eniola Olatunade, I'm sorry, I hope I pronounced that right. So how might we help brand owners, new and old, gain attraction and influence through creative designs? I think that this is a solid one. Yeah, so I think this is great. So up next, Toby says, how might we help foodies get access to quality food without breaking the bank? Great. In fact, I like this. I like this a lot. It's short, it's concise. And although foodies is a tricky persona, it's a tricky in terms of persona because like what that may mean may differ for different people, especially if you have to work within a team. But I think that it works. So now Precious Oluwatomiche says, how might we help university students manage academics and business? I like this. It's great, although it's a little vague because we have to understand when we say academics and business, do we mean university students who are business owners? But yeah, I think that's pretty solid. Tolu Alokwe says, how might we help young professionals navigate imposter syndrome while building a brand online? Amazing. I think this is something that we can tackle as well. Great. So I want to share a few things following these, but I wanted to find out if we have any questions first. Any questions or any notes before I move forward on that? Hi everyone. Apologies. I was asking if anyone had any questions or notes before we move forward. Questions, notes, anything? Enoch, I think I can see your hand up, but I don't know if your hand up was up before or just recently. Okay, great. I think we'll move forward then. Now, for the next step from how might we statements, a really essential part of things is now one essential thing that we learned, I'm going to put in the comments as well, is if you are looking to craft a major directional overview for how to tackle what's it called? How to tackle a new story, a new product. There is a minor formula that we often use in advertising and etc. So we often say, your how might we plus your product insights. Now, what's the product insight? The product insight is possibly that a major tagline or idea you've developed for your product. There's an example on the sheet here that says, I think we're all familiar with Red Bull, where Red Bull says, Red Bull gives you wings. That's a product insight. For brands like beverages like Milo and Bonvita, we may say things like, oh, it helps you, it makes you more nutritious, it helps your kids, it gives them more energy. That's a product insight. So now, when you're trying to get like what we call a big idea or the overarching theme, the primary idea for whatever storytelling you're telling about the product, many times the formula is your how might we statements and your product insights. Now you put those two together, the result of whatever you get is a great idea for selling your product. So now in this case, we may say, the example I have here is how might we communicate to a 21-year-old student who often studies overnight that Red Bull gives them wings to be the best student. And the solution to that may be, so we communicate to them that Red Bull gives you the energy to be the best student that there is. That's a storytelling theme. That's a great big idea that you can then put into your story. And that's just like an essential thing for us to note. So I think that's about it on how might we statements. Before we move forward, do I have any questions? Any notes, any contributions before I move forward on that? Hi guys, any questions? No questions? Okay, amazing. Now, so we're moving to sketching and prototyping. And although a lot of times when you talk about this in terms of design, etc., regardless of what you're working on, you need to sketch. So for those of us in perhaps copywriting, digital marketing, content development, you may not literally have to draw something. But many times you have to put to paper the ideas that will solve for your how might we's. You have to brainstorm and come up with ideas and say, oh, based off the how might we statement, in this case now, we wanted to touch on what Rotimi shared. Now we say, how might we help business owners secure their businesses with group contributions? So we put to paper a couple ideas. Do we want them to have an app where they can track group contributions? Do we want there to be a business or a literal physical center where people can go drop off group contributions and sign up for when they've collected group contributions? Do we want to have a business bank of sorts for that kind of thing? Now, every idea that you come up with, you put to paper. And one essential thing you now do is you sort by what we call, and we'll get into that shortly, but you put that to paper. Now you sort by 3 major metrics, what we call feasibility, viability, and business relevance, I should think. Sorry, 1 minute. I just want to confirm. So great. So now here's where we go. Now feasibility, so by feasibility, viability, and business relevance. Feasibility means for how great your idea is, how executable is it? Now, if you come up with an idea, say for how to help businesses secure their own businesses with group contributions, and you want to build an app, say that you need, say you want to build an app where AI literally goes over to these businesses and helps them manage their businesses. Is that feasible? It's not. So that idea goes further down on the list. Now for viability, you think, how relevant is this in the business sense? Is this something that can sell? Now, if we built out this kind of thing, will people be willing to pay for it? That's where viability comes in. Would people be interested in paying for this? Is this something that people care about, and etc.? Now, for business relevance, you have to now figure out if people would pay for this, how would they pay for it? How would I make revenue from this? And that is how we craft for business ideas, for concepts, for products. Basically, that's how you assess it. And altogether, that's how you sort those ideas. So you don't just put together the ideas and say, oh, you know what, the one that looks prettiest, this is the one I want to go ahead with. You sort them by feasibility, viability, and business relevance. How well would these ideas work? Now, for those of us in design, you may not be deciding to craft for a business. You may want to build an application, or you may want to build a design. Now you have to, based off the how might we, you have to put it to paper. So if you want to say how might we communicate to mothers that Milo is good for their children, if you've come up with an idea of how, you put it to paper. So you can sketch or come up with written ideas and say, I think that if I made a design where a child intakes Milo, and then on the next slide, he becomes a giant, you put that to paper. And then once you've done that, you now assess which ones you are going ahead with. So for this, you may not have to do like feasibility and viability as much because it's not a business, but you still will, because sometimes you come up with an idea and you think, oh, I need to make a 3D video of this. Is that feasible? Do you have the technology available for that? If not, scrap it. And it helps to remember that the first version of whatever you're building will not be perfect. That's a standard thing. That's sort of where the concept of MVPs come from. An MVP stands for minimum viable product. So when you build the first draft or the first version of whatever idea it is that you've come up with, you have to know that it will not be perfect. In fact, it will possibly just have the very basic tools or themes that you feel like you can execute at the moment. And that's how that works. So, yeah. So moving on to that, you now, like I said before, you now have to understand in terms of execution, you now have to think to yourself, how best do I bring this to life? Do I need to have a shoot? If you're in the design space, do you need to set up a shoot? If you're in the product space, do you need to set up a design sprint? Sometimes there's a scripture that says, when a man is going to build a house, he has to count the cost. And that's an essential part of building anything, literally. Now that you have the idea, now that you know what it is that you want to build, you now have to count your costs. What does it take to execute? And that's an essential part of that. So yeah, I want to say that that's a first part of introduction to design thinking. And next, we're just going to jump into the highlights of storytelling. So I'm just going to do an overview of why stories matter, how to tell stories, and the kinds of stories that are essential for any product or marketing or UX design. But before we get into that, I want to touch on any questions that we may have regarding design thinking. You may ask anything before we get started. Okay, so I'm just going to put that in the chat section. So we're taking a quick break for Q&A. So if you have any questions on design thinking, if you have any questions about how it relates to the work that you do currently, or anything in that space, you can ask that right now. Or perhaps if you even have like a current product that you want to implement these for, and you have questions about how best to implement that, we'll be taking questions about that right now. Great. Precious says, how do I test for viability? And that's a very essential question. So one of two things. First off, you need to speak to whoever it is likely to be, or that's likely to be your audience. That means that you have to speak to your potential users. If you decide that you're going to be selling, in this case now for what it was that Rotimi shared, you have to speak to business owners. You have to ask them, is this something that's going to work for me? Is this something that's going to work for you? Is this something you're willing to pay for? I had a very interesting interaction like 2 weeks ago. And also you have to sort of like, how do I put this? Sort of like when you do your final year project at school, you have to expand your sample size. Larger sample size, the better. So we've been building out a product, and we spoke to a couple of business owners, and they had a couple of directions for how best, or they felt like, this was a great product. And then we spoke to a couple of other business owners, and they were not as interested. And the ones who were interested were not interested in paying for that particular offering. And in that sense, that in a business sense, it's not viable, because why? We have to pay for developers, we have to pay for marketers on the team, we have to pay for salespeople, you have to pay for support, APIs, and all of these things. At that point, that idea may not be viable, and that's how you test for viability. And one essential thing I want to say is, Precious, do you want to speak further to the question before we jump in?
Yes, because you said I can just share the business idea or something a product idea I'm trying to test out. So maybe that would help you give me a more directed answer.
Exactly. Yeah. So you could do that as well. So we could talk about that right now on the call if you're free.
Okay. The business idea I have, it's more of like a service for like people that are running their master's program. I have a few friends that are doing their master's currently, and they struggle a lot with balancing out their times and their time management skills. And I do a lot of things in learning science about how to like more effective ways to study, some of the things they are not open to, and also how to implement AI in their study routine effectively. So I feel like it's a lot of things, even for students doing their like final year projects, better and efficient ways to carry out research, managing their time, productivity tips. So I've been thinking of offering that as a service, maybe like coaching calls, but I don't really know how viable it is, something like that.
Okay. And lastly, I feel like that's a really great service. That's something that would have been really helpful for me in final year as a student back then, or even like while doing masters. So one essential question, it ties back to speaking to business owners. You need to speak to some sort of the business of your potential audience rather. You need to sort of understand, in this case now, for people doing masters, is this something that they need? And as someone said once, and this is something that is very popular in design thinking, we say that there's two types of products. There are painkillers and there are vitamins. Painkillers are things that once you build and introduce, people often think to themselves, how did I ever survive without this? For vitamins, they're nice to have. They're like, this is a great product. It solves a great problem. But if it didn't exist, I would still be okay. And that's sort of where you have to find a middle ground. So for viability, you usually have to ensure people are more willing to pay for things that are painkillers. So you need to have these conversations with your potential audiences and say to them, is this something that you very much would be interested in? Is this something that you've often wondered if it existed? But most essentially, you have to understand or find out if they are willing to pay for it. And another thing is, it doesn't have to be a lot of money. But what it now has to be is, you now have to think to yourself, what does it cost you to build or execute this thing? That's your own cost of labor as well. Because eventually, if it's something that builds out long term, you're going to need something that is that actively foots the bills, basically. So basically, you now have to just do a cost sheet. This is how much it costs you to build and execute this thing. Whether you have to onboard new team members, whether it's just your own personal expenses, or even just whatever AI tool you need to implement to build this out. And this is how much you think that you will be able to build up from these users. And in that direction, you are able to now say, okay, this versus this, expected revenue versus expected business cost, especially having spoken to some of these people. And that's the way you're able to test for viability. But one essential thing I'll say is if they're not able to see it as a painkiller, if they're not able to see it as something that, oh, how did I survive without this before? Viability is very low on that end of things. And also one major thing is also the space that we're in Africa. A lot of people do not have a lot of dispensable income for nice to haves. So unless it's something that they need, although it does sound like something that would be very relevant in a needing space, but you also have to ensure that if somebody said, you know what, I can't survive without this. If they decided to go and survive without it, is it something that at the end of the day, they'll say, oh, I'm coming back because this made my life so much easier than existing without it? That's sort of like a viability test. So I hope that answered the question, Precious.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Amazing. Okay. Hi, Adrian. So as a graphic designer, how can you incorporate design thinking into your work? So design thinking is really most important in design. as well, especially for graphic and product designers. So going through that process, that what we call the ideas process, and I will leave like an overview of it in the text section as well. You can even just look it up your own time. It's called the Ideas Framework. It was developed by the Stanford School of Design to just sort of help people, navigate that process. So empathize, understand the problem, come up with ideas, build a version of it that you can test, push out. So as a graphic designer, what that means for me usually is if I'm working on like ad campaigns, so sometime I'm trying to think of a time recently when I had to work on something that was graphic design related. Okay, so a couple of years ago, we were building out a campaign for a scholarship for women in tech. And I needed to develop a couple of visuals in that regard. So what that meant was I now needed to understand, and back to the how might I communicate to women in tech that this opportunity is best for them? How might I communicate to women looking to go into tech that this program would help solve those problems? So having understood that, I now said, okay, you know what? I need to empathize and understand women who are looking to go into tech. What are the themes or ideas or concepts that are in their interests visually? What are the kind of posters or colors or typography that appeals to them in general? In that way, you empathize with the kind of things that they're interested in. From that point onward, then you put a prototype, set up a couple of designs, actively test. We used to A/B test a lot, so we would run multiple types of designs on ads. Whichever ones perform best, we know that was the best prototype, and then we move forward with that. So yeah, as a graphic designer, I would say that is the best space for design thinking in your work. You need to empathize, you need to prototype, and you need to how might we are. In fact, I think that's possibly one of the greatest things I have ever learned in my career. The concept of how might we. The moment you have a how might we, it sort of mentally opens the way for you to craft solutions to that problem. So yeah. Okay, on to Blessing Damilola. She says, I'm a graphic designer. It looks like graphic design sites are saturated. How do you gain feasibility in this business? This is something that we will touch on in storytelling, because outside of telling stories to sell a product that you have, personal branding is also really essential. A lot of people who are graphic designers now identify themselves as brand or visual designers, because storytelling wise, it appears that appears to be the better branding for being able to tell a story to your audience. So you're telling your audience that, you know what, I help develop visuals that communicate your brand better to your audiences. I help develop, interfaces that your users can interact with. I help develop logos that people see and are able to identify and say, oh, this is what your business is about. And in that way, you sort of separate yourself from the rest of the crop. I would also say that design has always been a space that's been really saturated in general. How to sort of gain feasibility for yourself in this business is, I would say, one thing is to add additional skills. One thing that's helped me personally was that outside of graphic design in general, first off, I don't identify as a graphic designer. Brand or visual design is always it. But what that also meant was I had to upskill a bit. I had to learn illustration. I had to also actively master brand identity design very effectively. How do brands work? How do brands interact with each other? And what is the role of visual design in that as well? That sort of helps you stand out from the crowd. And if you can, I mean, it's a step in a bit of a further direction. Product design, UX design, UI design. I won't say UI design because it's closer to graphic design than most of the other fields. But there's really an opportunity in there for you to be able to brand yourself differently from everyone else, because the space is pretty saturated. But if you have any other question tied to this, you could also just share, so that I'm sure that I'm attending to all parts of that question. All right, so Blessing, I would take that to mean that you don't have any major questions around that. But if you still do, you can also just reach out at a later time, and then we can speak better on that as well. Okay, so now we'll be jumping into, and we'll just do like a quick overview on storytelling, because I would really like for us to dive into storytelling better tomorrow. So what is storytelling? Storytelling is basically any way that you craft a narrative about a product, about a person, about an idea, about literally anything. Things can stand individually. It's the stories that surround them that make them important. It's the stories that surround them that tell us how to or what to think about them. AI has always been a thing in existence. And when people made movies about AI before now, if you've seen iRobot, the one with Will Smith, your expectation is that AI wants to take over the world and it's something that is really dangerous and etc. And that exists because of stories. Now we all use ChatGPT every day. ChatGPT is built of AI, very effective AI, and we don't constantly live with the threat or the fear that AI is dangerous or it's going to take over the world. Why? Because of stories. The way that ChatGPT was given to us or presented to us, narrative that surrounded it, was what made it that way. The same for the internet, the same for the iPhone. One of the most essential things for the iPhone and the Apple products is it's constantly communicated as think different. It's constantly communicated as something that's different from the rest of the space. And if you've never wondered why, it's perhaps why when people are trying to categorize or talk about Apple devices, people don't say, or people rarely say, oh, Apple, Google, Techno, Infinix, Samsung. People say Apple and Android. That may also be part of, lots of operating systems and everything, but Apple has been able to tell stories that single themselves out from everything and everyone else. And that is something that is really important. Stories in general, stories are really important. So in this workshop today, tomorrow, Sunday as well, we will be touching on how can you tell stories to make your ideas, to make your product, and whatever it is that you're selling or telling appear more inviting or appear in a particular way. And we'll touch on so many things. We'll touch on archetypes, we'll touch on parts of people in a story and the components of a great story. So let's start off on what makes a story. There are 4 major parts of a story. The character in a story, that's whether a main character or a hero, some people may say a protagonist. The next part is the conflict. Now, what is the challenge they're trying to overcome? What problem are they facing? Often there is a climax. Apologies. There's a climax, if that's something I'm familiar with, the part of the story where things get to a head. Then there's a resolution, the outcome, or the end of the story. A popular story, what's a popular story that we're all very familiar with? I'm a big fan of the Last Airbender series, so I think that's or Avengers. I think everybody's fairly familiar with the Marvel universe. So Avengers is a great example. The Avengers are the heroes. The conflict or the challenge that they face is the fact that they consistently have to fight, evildoers or Thanos, basically. The climax of the story is at the point where they have to fight Thanos and try not to lose the gauntlet to Thanos so he doesn't destroy everything. And the outcome of the story or the resolution is that they win. And a substantial amount of stories in products and marketing often follow this pattern and utilize at least 1, 2, or 3 of these elements. But the 2 major elements that you will find in products, in ideas, and in marketing are the protagonist or the character and the challenge that they're facing. And we'll touch on it from one thing to the other. Now, in a product, especially for those of us who might have interest in like UX or etc., your user is the main character. And the problem that they've come to solve is the challenge. Now, your app is supposed to act as like a guide to solving that problem. And I want to use a really great example here to sort of just like push that. RiseVest. RiseVest is an application I use very well. RiseVest helps you save in USD. And it's a really great application because before now I've often thought, how best do you invest your money to keep against inflation? Because a lot of times you feel like you're saving money and then, the exchange rate jumps from 800 to 1,600 and your money loses value. Now, as a protagonist, that's a problem or a challenge that I faced, saving money in another currency. And now that product solves for that problem. So, but what that means is whatever story RiseVest is going to tell from their ads, from the emails they interact with me with, from the copy that is written within, the content that's written within the application as well, it has to follow the line of that story of the problem that I want to solve. Now, if I've been using RiseVest for the longest time, or if I'm about to start using RiseVest and say they sell an ad that says, oh, saving USD, I get to the app, they say, oh, hedge your money against inflation. Great. But then I open the app, and on the first page, it says something like, um, oh, protect your house against, or protect your house against becoming too expensive. It veers off from the story. It breaks away from the story, it breaks away from the problem or the challenge that I'm trying to solve. And as such, I get confused. I don't understand what the narrative is, and I leave. And that is why stories are important. Another essential thing for stories also is it helps people know what to think about whatever idea or product is that you're selling. And if you don't tell stories around your product, people will make the stories by themselves. Say for Piggyverse right now, Piggyverse has said, oh, Piggyverse has always said, save with us, we'll lock your money, we'll give you interest, etc. The story that Piggyverse has said is that we're helping you grow your money. Same thing for Carrywise. We're helping you become a better, or have better finances in general. Now, that's a problem that people are facing. And you notice that a lot of their messaging focuses on you, the individual or the user or the protagonist, and the problem that's trying to be solved. And that's an essential thing for that. So, and I will write, let me just put that in the comment section as well. The major things to tackle in the story: character, climax, problem, outcome. And it shows up in everything. It shows up in literally everything. So now, an essential next part of things is what are the popular kind of stories that exist. Now, there's a popular story or a popular story theme, and if you're religious, I think this is something you're fairly familiar with. It's called the hero's journey. Now, how the hero's journey works is it's the same thing that happens to Jesus. It happens to, if you've seen the Star Wars series, it happens to Luke Skywalker. It happens to Aang from the Last Airbender series. It happens to, it's a popular thing. And how it goes is that the character is in a space where they are dealing with a particular problem consistently. They don't know the solution to that problem, or they live in obscurity. I'm trying to think of a character from a popular show that I feel like we would all be very familiar with. But anyways, I'll go with the Last Airbender. So the way the story goes, he lives in obscurity. He lives in a place separate from everyone else. But he has friends and people around him who guide him along the way. And then he meets a conflict or a problem. He struggles to overcome the conflict or problem, but based on the assistant or the what the guide has given to him, he's able to overcome that problem. And that's called the hero's journey. So that's sort of like a task I want us to look up. Read up on the hero's journey, because that's an essential part of understanding protagonists, understanding the concept of a single person being the base of a story. And that's something that would really help us in understanding storytelling as a whole. So next step, so that's just one task, and I think that's something that we're going to touch on again tomorrow. It's an activity. But right now, I want us to do a quick task. Using yourself as a main character, you can either decide to share in the comment section for this anyways, or unmute yourself to speak. Pick a problem that you faced this week. Talk about yourself as the main character and identify who, someone or something that helped to solve that problem. And let's walk through that real quickly. So you can, we can do that in say 5 minutes. So from now to about 3 minutes, now to about 9:30. So you can either leave it as a text in the chat box, or you can unmute your mic to speak. Talk about yourself this week, a problem you faced, and someone who guided you to solve that problem. So I'll be waiting. Let me also just put that in there. And it could be an obscure task. It could be, oh, I ran out of water in the morning before I had to leave the house. Or, oh, I was trying to cross the road, someone helped out. Or it could even be, oh, I ran out of cash and I need to look for a POS person to help me withdraw on that. So I'll be listening. Okay, hi, Precious. Great. Okay, Precious, your hand is up. I think you can speak.
Okay. My name is Precious once again. Earlier this week, because I'm learning to program Python. So earlier this week, I ran into issues with my code. I was having troubles understanding object-oriented programming. Because I'm going through a tutorial, but not like proper. I'm trying to build a project. So um I tried using the tutorials. I didn't really understand. I tried ChatGPT. I wasn't really getting it until I spoke with my mentor, and he was able to explain it quicker and faster in a very simpler way. So I think that was just the simple journey I had to navigate through. And another thing I noticed was reflecting on my approach to solving obstacles, because I knew I could have asked my mentor for help, but I decided to go to tutorials instead, thinking to help me to build this self learning skills, whereas I could have learned faster by just asking. So that reflection helped me to think about my approach to like reducing the learning curve.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Precious. And I think that's a really great insight. Trying to learn something new, and then trying a lot of options for being able to navigate a challenge or a problem, and then getting that as a solution. So interestingly, something you touched on, and it's really important for storytelling. And I'll touch on more. I'll touch on it more later. But it's an essential part of when people are trying to find someone to guide them. Now, note that when you were trying to solve for this problem, two things you spoke to, two people you interacted with were ChatGPT and your mentor. Now, these are two people that by social trust, you sort of trust these people to give you the best advice. If you and I had been in contact, or if you even had a friend who you knew was perhaps I'm looking for another career, a marine biologist, knowing that they do not have something that works in, or they are not experts in Python, despite the fact that they were your friends, you would not take their recommendation on solving that problem. And that's an essential thing to look at as well as a product or someone who's building something. Two things: people like to listen to stories or like to get solutions from people who have authoritativeness, but people also invest a lot in social trust. You wouldn't have the chances you would have reached out to someone that you didn't know at all for help on this project were a lot less than you having to reach out to somebody who you already knew. And that's an essential part of stories. So when you're building something, you're building a story, you're building a campaign, remember to invest a lot in authoritativeness and social trust, because those are two things that people are really interested in. Okay, Priscilla, thank you so much. So the character is a student. The problem is body pains from moving hostels. Yes. Climax is found a video explaining that exercise and more rest will help. The outcome is less body pains and feeling more comfortable. Perfect. This is an amazing story. This is a very well crafted story. And interestingly, this is a story that would make a great ad. If I had a product or a video or a product that, we had videos that would talk about exercise and how to rest more to reduce body pains, this is a great way to tell a story about that product. And this is really how, this is one of the ways that, stories sort of put themselves in our lives and in our navigating these things. So does anybody else want to share a story? Sort of in the way Priscilla and Precious have done. Character, a problem, what the climax of the story was, and the outcome that you concluded from it.
Good evening.
Hi.
Good evening. So, okay, my name is Adebola. It was actually during the course of you talking that I actually knew that, okay, this is what actually happened. So I'm a social media manager that just started out, and I attended an interview that was, I think, on Wednesday or Thursday. So then the final interview was today, but I felt like, okay, I didn't do well because one, my phone went low, my power bank was low. I had to go to like the third street because I'm a student. I had to go to the third street of one of my friends to go charge. And when I got there and my phone was already like up to a certain percentage, I feel like, okay, let me collect it and be going. I found out I didn't have data. So when I now find a way to get data to like someone to hotspot, and I did data. When I got home like 5 minutes to the time of the interview. I was panicking. I was like, okay, just I couldn't even calm down. So during the course of the interview, the lady was asking me certain question that I just like, okay, I know this thing, but I couldn't actually like
Pressure,
say
career
it.
pressure.
It was after the interview I was like, okay, what's going on? I know this thing. I know what she's asking me, but why couldn't I just deliver it? So it was during the course of you talking that I realized the issue that what if I had calmed down? What if I'm just like, okay, just calm down, even though I was late? That's just it.
Amazing, amazing.
But thank you. Thank you. Like it made me realize, even this evening when I was trying to like meditate, I was like, okay, what went wrong? I couldn't even find answer, but now I found my answer.
Oh, there you
Thank
go.
you.
Thank you so much for sharing that story, Debola. And I think it points to something that we've highlighted as well. In this case, you're the character, and that is a problem that you had faced. In fact, you faced two problems. One, you struggled with getting the required resources for having that session. But the second problem was that you started to fret during the session. And now, one essential thing is if I was building a product and I understood this problem that you had, I would think to myself, where can I insert myself as a product? Two places. One, if I had a product that perhaps provided electricity or power banks, or etc., that would be a great product that would be a great product to insert into that story. But also that would be a great story to retell because it helps other people who are trying to navigate that understand that. But yeah, I think that's a really great story. So for Blessing Damola says the character graphic designer, problem is social media carousel design challenge. Climax, checked Pinterest for ideas. Outcome came out with a very nice design award, my friend. Very great story, Blessing. And I think that this sort of points to a career-related story as well. This is a problem I'm facing. This is a solution. And one essential thing that I think that we should note for every one of these stories is that for every one of these stories where you were able to find a proper, or at the climax, you were able to find a solution, or that the outcome was as positive as you wanted it to be, there is a product or solution ingrained in there somewhere. For Precious, it was speaking to a mentor, and there's a product in there somewhere. There are products, who connect people to mentors. ChatGPT was included in there as well. Priscilla's case, she found a video explaining the exercise and more rest would help, and I assume that was through YouTube. For Blessing Damola, she spoke about Pinterest. Now, these are the kind of stories that we have in our lives, and we talk about the fact that products often insert themselves to solving these problems. Now, there are two places where this aligns. Now, on the product end of things, you now think to yourself, you have to build the kind of products that can solve these problems and insert themselves in these stories. From the marketing or storytelling end of things, you now know that having understood this kind of stories, this is an empathy place. You can now retell this kind of stories in ads, retell this kind of stories in videos, and you know that you will connect with the users at the end of the day. So I think that's a very essential step on that. Thank you. Is there anyone else with a story they may want to share? Okay. Romeo has shared a great story. Character, yourself, amazing. Problem, out of cash. The climax was needed some cash urgently, so I called a friend and told the problem. She asked, I come over and take the money, but I tried to send it to Momo, and she did. I was able to do what I wanted to do. Amazing story. Now, this is also followed the character, problem, and climax flow and outcome. And this means that if you are trying to understand the problem that a user goes through, you need to set up a similar flow. You need to set up a similar user persona and say, now in this case, so currently I lead a project called On Cloudy. It's a mental health community where we sort of use AI to help people just like build community and just find balance as young people in general and help with your mental and emotional health. So we're sourcing resources to help share these things. And for us, if I wanted to now build out the story, I say, okay, I'm a character probably who's burnt out from work. That's a problem. Now for the climax, I'm burned out from work. I do not know the resources or who to speak to solve this problem. And that's where we sort in our project. So what that means is if I was going to run ads for On Cloudy or develop content material for On Cloudy, that's the kind of story that it would gravitate around, because it goes from character, understanding who the character is, understanding who the problem is, and that's climax. At the same time, while developing the product, that's the story that, in fact, if I could pin it on my wall and look at it every single day, that's the story that's what I would do, because that's the problem I'm trying to solve. That's the kind of story that I will often find my product in and try to solve for that. So I think that we're winding down a bit for today. And I want us to touch on something briefly called brand archetypes. And this is something that, I'm sorry, it's another task that you guys are going to have to take home to look through tomorrow. Task read on brand archetypes. So, and I'm going to share a little backstory to this because I don't want you to just like overrun. So Carl Jung, and that is Jung, he was a really popular psychologist. He came up with a lot of major psychological theories that we use currently. And he came up with something called archetypes. He believed that all people were broken down into one of 12 types. And I think those types are, there's about 12 of them. There's the sage, the rebel, the outlaw, the joker. There's about 12 of them altogether. Very essential brand archetypes. And eventually, a lot of personality types that we even have today, or personality tests that we have today, stem from those brand archetypes. But in terms of brands, now brands and organizations often fit themselves into one of those 12. So I would like you to read on it. Let's touch on it tomorrow. And an essential task is, if you're working on a project or a brand at the moment, try to see what position does your brand fit in one of those archetypes. So what the archetypes mean is that they have individual personas that have personal attributes. One that I've had to use for a lot of clients is called the sage. Now, the sage is an archetype that means that your brand is very wise, it's very empathetic, but it's also a teaching brand. So it means that you're not a brand that your content jumps around a lot. You're not a brand that your content is untrustable. You deliver trusted information. You talk about things that people take seriously. This often works for medical organizations, political organizations, organizations like, and this is one of the reasons why, and I want to allude to the JAM situation that happened recently, where, you know, the JAM handle goes to tweet, God proposes, man disposes, man proposes, God disposes. And one of the reasons why there's such an outburst from everyone about such a tweet is that the archetype for an institution like that ought to be the sage archetype. What that means is we expect accurate information from them at all times. They are a teaching organization. At all times, they're expected to always give nurturing information. And if they do not, it breaks away from the brand archetype, and people believe that they cannot trust the brand to be consistent. And that is an essential part of storytelling. And how do people understand the kind of archetype that your brand has? By how you tell stories consistently, how you communicate consistently. You know that a brand like Duolingo, if you're not very familiar, you can look up Duolingo's branding online. It's very humorous, very funny. That would be the Joker brand. Or the Joker archetype is very different from a brand like Microsoft, because they offer different things. And the way that we know for a fact that Duolingo is very different from Microsoft is how they consistently communicate, the stories that they tell from time to time. So the two tasks ahead of tomorrow are, I would like us to read on brand archetypes. I would like us to read up on the hero's journey, because we're going to be talking about those as well. Tomorrow, we will be working on understanding how to very well define the problem. Okay, Cheche, your hands are up. It looks like you have a question. Okay, if you're speaking, you're muted. Okay, I think we can speak on that. So tomorrow, what you're going to do is you're going to create user personas. We're going to have a task where we create user personas tomorrow. I would also actively walk you through how to set up user interviews to sort of understand what your users need to do. I'll see if I can share a couple of templates also on user surveys, the kind of surveys that you should speak to users with, sort of empathize and understand what they need, and etc. And then we will review the user personas that you'll be writing tomorrow to understand what kind of errors have you made. Is this the kind of user persona that would help you understand the user burst or not? So hopefully we're able to cover that quickly tomorrow. Then for Sunday, we're going to touch on prototyping majorly for Sunday. So how best do you move from ideation to putting things to paper to execution? But also, how do you pitch your stories? If you have an idea, how do you move from an idea to a product? How do you move from an idea to a product that has its own identity? How do you pitch that idea or product to other people through stories? How do people understand that through marketing and communications and etc.? So yeah, I'll also be sharing and walking us through a couple of tools that would be really helpful. I know there are a lot of us that may not be as design savvy, but Figma has a number of tools that would really help you navigate that process from ideation to final execution and prototype. So we're back to Q&As. Okay, I see a couple of questions. Precious, you asked, how do you establish social trust? I was about to let me just set up Q&A. So if you have any other questions, you can also leave in the chat section or just raise your hand so I can answer those. How do you establish social trust? Very interesting question, and something that is a question I have from a lot of founders that I work and speak with often. Two ways. One, referrals. A founder once said to me, very close to me, said that you know that your product is good and is working when people recommend it to others without incentive. That's one way to establish social trust. But referrals are the biggest way to establish social trust. I often talk about the fact that if you think about Uber and the fact that we all just decided to start entering strangers' cars to take us to places that we've never been at random times. I mean, sometimes I tell my friends that I'm late, I'm out very late, I may be out till 10, 11, and I know that I have to be home and I'm taking an Uber. I don't know the Uber driver. I don't know where he comes from. I don't know where he got his car. In fact, the way it is, he could drive me literally anywhere. But because of how social trust worked, the first few times I used it, I didn't have that fear. I didn't have that fear at all, not very remotely. And that's how social trust worked. And it's also because in the very early stages, Piggyvest, Carrywise, Uber, they invested a lot in referral programs. They invested a lot in rewarding people who were able to get their product to resell to others. So for everybody that you resell, or for everyone you get to take an Uber trip, back then I think they used to give 500 and 1,000 in rewards or something. Same thing for Piggyvest and Shoudeck. So referrals are very big on establishing social trust. Is creating content online enough? It's a step in the right direction, but you also want to make sure that you interact a lot with users online. You also want to physical events if you can agree to. People really put trust in that. And what metrics can you use to evaluate your social trust? Social listening. I'm just going to type that out. So you can look into social listening a lot. What social listening means really is, and it happens for really larger brands, maybe a little trickier to do for smaller brands, but spend a lot of time looking through your comments, looking through your DMs. If you're on Twitter, search up your company name. What are people saying about it? What do people think about it? If you have someone who's used your product before, ask them or get them to fill out the form later on. What do they think about it? Is it something that they, especially if it's a very new kind of product, you can actually do plain user interviews with people who haven't used it before. Would they be interested in using it? Is it something they think they can trust? Etc., etc. So yeah. And then I think if you have any more questions on that, I should be able to share. But I think that's mostly it. Precious, I hope I answered all your questions. Okay, amazing. All right, guys. Anyone else have any questions? You can just either share in the comment section or just raise your hand.